the next thing we're going to talk about here is related a little bit to Bernie Sanders, but it's also involving, it's also a little bit related to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but it's mainly about Bernie Sanders. I'm sorry, not Bernie Sanders, but Joe Biden. I already said Bernie Sanders. It has to do with Joe Biden going after progressives and kind of trying to downplay their ideas and pretending as if their ideas are too radical and not, saying how pragmatic how pragmatic how pragmatic Joe Biden is, and that his ideas should be championed a hell of a lot more than what Bernie Sanders and AOC and, Ilhan Omar and all these other Justice Democrats, those type of people that are pushing for. So Joe Biden gave a speech to not a speech, I'm sorry, he gave an interview to CNN where he talked about that very issue. He talked about the progressive issues, at least. In this case, he was talking about Medicare-For-All and at least the main progressive ideas that are being advocated for by progressive politicians and progressive activists and everything out there. So he was talking to Chris Cuomo. And let's check out what he says here, and then we'll talk about it on the other side.
How do you convince the party that these more advanced ideas, like all in on Medicare for all, that matter to them?
Advanced.
But they're popular in the party.
Well, by the way, watch. That's what this election is about. I'm happy to debate that issue and all those issues with my friends, because guess what? Again, look who won the races. Look who won last time out. We had, and by the way, I think Ocasio-Cortez is a brilliant, bright woman, but she won a primary. In the general election fights, who won? Mainstream Democrats who are very progressive on social issues and very strong on education, healthcare. Look, my North Star is the middle class. When the middle class does well, everybody does well.
How do you do better for them economically, if not with these 70% tax rates?
Well, three things. One, I do raise the tax rate to 39.5%. I do, in fact, eliminate the ability for them to write off capital gains the way they do now. I would raise billions of dollars, raise the corporate tax rate from 20 to 28%. It was 36 to 28%. That raised billions of dollars.
Trump will say, but that's what brought the economy up to where it is those tax cuts.
Ask these people who work in this restaurant how that economy came up for them. Ask them how good they feel about it. Ask them how the stock market has really helped them. Ask how driving us $2 trillion greater in debt has done anything for them.
So, typical Joe Biden putting out his shitty policies out there, but he's also shitting on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and downplaying the fact that she the fact that she won a primary but didn't win a general election. And he talks about how, the main people that won general elections for the Democratic Party are all, mainstream type, Democrats and politicians. Okay, that's not a good thing. As much as you think it is, it's and to act like AOC, she just won. She only won a primary. Yeah, she won a primary against a guy that was outraising her by like 4-1 or 3-1, and that was a guy that was in that seat for 20 years, I think, close to at least I would say at least 6 or 7 terms, 8 terms maybe, and he was considered the person to kind of the next person to take over for Nancy Pelosi. He was going to be her essentially Nancy Pelosi's successor, and that was Joe Crowley. And this is who AOC beat. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez beat a guy that was guaranteed to win. He was guaranteed to win that seat, and Joe Biden is just talking about her as if she's whatever. She's a brilliant and bright woman, but she won a primary. But then, and then he talks about how, how his North Star is the middle class, but then you're taking all this money from all these corporate donors and you're doing fundraisers with, the heads of the CEOs of, big multinational corporations. And then you're going out there and telling them how they're victims, as we've covered in past podcasts, for this show. And, he's going out there and doing fundraisers and telling the rich how they're not enemies of anybody and how they're, great people, and then he needs them. And then now he talks about how the middle class is his North Star. Get the fuck out of here, man. You're not that. The North Star for you is the corporate donors that you suck up to on a daily basis. And those are the people that you care about. So let me read an article here from Newsweek, which talks about how Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are pushing back against Biden's a little bit, Biden's slight there, where he kind of went after them a little bit. So let me read this one for you guys a little bit. It's a pretty short article, so let's check it out here. It says it's from Newsweek.com. It says Bernie Sanders rebuffs Biden's Medicare-For-All criticism, says he and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are working for agenda that America needs. It says Senator Bernie Sanders rebuffed 2020 rival Joe Biden's criticism of his Medicare-For-All health care plan and argues that he was working alongside fellow progressive lawmakers like Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to create a political agenda America needs. Biden had told CNN in an interview that he believes a more moderate Democratic candidate will have the best chance to take down Donald Trump, during the 2020 general election. The former vice president argued that most Democratic voters are center-left, not way left. And then quoting Biden, as you read in the article here, as you heard in the interview here, he says, "Look, who won last time out? And by the way, I think Ocasio-Cortez is a brilliant, bright woman, but she won a primary. In general election fights, who won?" Biden told CNN's Chris Cuomo, "Mainstream Democrats who are very progressive on social issues and very strong on education and healthcare. Look, my North Star is the middle class. When the middle class does well, everybody else does well. Everybody does well." Biden also swiped at Sanders' Medicare-For-All universal health care proposal, saying that he has a plan that's, quote, rational and will cost a hell of a lot less. The former vice president said he would not eliminate private insurance like the Sanders proposal intends, but would offer Medicare as an option for anyone who wants to buy into the system. So Biden supports a public option, essentially, which was pretty much the furthest thing that the Obama campaign was willing to support and was pushing for when Obama was not the campaign, but when Obama was president in 2009-ish, 2010-ish, when he was somewhat on board with the idea of Medicare for all. He was like, "Oh, okay, but let's do a public option," and that's like pretty much that was because he knew that the health insurance companies would obviously not support Medicare for all and universal health care. So he was like, "Yeah, let's push for a public option because that's going to be most feasible to the big to the insurance companies and big corporations, whatnot." So it says, continuing on with the article, it says Sanders quickly rebuffed Biden's criticism in a Twitter post Friday, writing he is, quote, proud to work with Ocasio-Cortez to craft the, quote, agenda America needs, and the one that will take down Trump in 2020. And this is quoting Bernie here, at least his tweet. It says, "I'm proud to be working with at AOC and so many other Democrats to pass Medicare for all, debt-free college, and a Green New Deal. This is the agenda America needs, and that will energize voters to defeat Donald Trump," he wrote. Said Sanders has often had to defend his socialist policies through the 2020 primary race. During the first Democratic debate, candidates like former Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper and Senator Michael Bennet took aim at Sanders' bold proposals like the Green New Deal and universal health care. It says the bottom line is, if we don't clearly define that we are not socialists, like the Republicans are going to come at us every way they can and call us socialists, Hickenlooper said. Sanders fired back, giving his relatively high poll numbers to refute the criticism that his proposals are too radical to win over American voters and defeat Trump in 2020. The last poll I saw had us 10 points ahead of Donald Trump because the American people understand that Trump is a phony, that Trump is a pathological liar and a racist, and he lied to the American people during his campaign. That's Bernie Sanders saying that at the debate. The last paragraph here says, since launching his 2020 campaign in February, the 77-year-old senator has steadily ranked among the top Democratic candidates in early polls. Real Clear Politics average of national polling shows Sanders to have 14.2% of support, placing him in third place behind former Vice President Joe Biden and California Senator Kamala Harris. So Bernie Sanders is he's obviously not willing to take any shit from Joe Biden here. He is happy to stand up for Ocasio-Cortez. He's happy to stand up for the ideas that he believes in, and that's, as usual with Bernie Sanders, it's great to see. It's not definitely not surprising. He is not the kind of person that is going to be bullied around and told that that his policies are not going to work, and that's the days of doing that. The days of letting that pass is not. It just doesn't exist anymore. And the Democrats that are running, especially Joe Biden, especially Kamala Harris, Cory Booker. I mean, those guys are those people are kind of. They claim to be in favor of Medicare-For-All, but they're really not, as we profiled in the past, especially with Kamala Harris for sure. Elizabeth Warren claims that she supports different paths to it. So does Kamala Harris. They've gone back and forth on those policies many times. Elizabeth Warren, to her credit, has been consistent in not supporting Medicare-For-All. She did support his Medicare-For-All legislation when in the Senate and everything. But as far as saying yeah, we just we are in support of Medicare-For-All, all that stuff, it seems like Kamala Harris is the one that has flip-flopped the most on that, as well as abolishing private insurance and stuff like that too. We're going to be getting to how popular that actually is, abolishing private insurance. So that's going to be shown in one of the segments later on in the show today. But yeah, I mean, Elizabeth Warren she's always kind of talked about I support a path to Medicare-For-All. Whereas the first town hall that Kamala Harris had, which I mentioned and I talked about before in our last podcast, she talked about in her first town hall after she declared she was going to run in January, 6 months ago, just a long time ago. It's amazing it's already been 6 months that she's been running. But she said that, she supports Medicare-For-All, period. Her campaign said the same exact thing, but then they backtracked. Even in that town hall, that CNN town hall 6 months ago, she said she supported abolishing private health insurance companies and health insurers. Then she backed up on that too. In the last debate, when they asked her, "Do you support abolishing private insurers?" She said yes. She raised her hands, but then later on, in an interview on MSNBC's Morning Joe, she said that she misinterpreted the question, and then she said she does not support abolishing private insurers. So, Kamala Harris is definitely the most flip-floppy one ever. Elizabeth Warren has been a little bit smarter in just saying that she does not support Medicare-For-All to its fullest extent. She said she supports it, but she supports different paths to it. Whereas Kamala Harris has said she supports different paths, but that's after she said she supports it. Fully implementing support it, but then says something different later on. And so it's these are situations. When it comes to the policies that are progressive, policies that people like myself and other progressives support, you can be almost positively sure that majority of the candidates that are running in this race that claim to be in support of something like Medicare-For-All are not going to be supporting it. The only person that truly does support it and truly has stood behind it and not swayed on that is Bernie Sanders. And that's why, as I've said many times, even said today, that anytime you see these candidates supposedly pushing for Medicare-For-All and saying they support it, and let alone any progressive policies, really, they don't really support them. You can't trust these people to ultimately back up what they're gonna, back up what they said before and just kind of repeat it and just say like, okay, this is what I believe. And they just won't do it. So yeah. But when it comes to these progressive candidates, a lot of them I have trouble supporting them because I don't feel like their policies are consistently progressive. And as I've said before, Bernie Sanders is the only candidate up there that I truly do support all of his policies, and I support everything that he says, and I trust him. Tulsi Gabbard obviously is somebody that I've mentioned that I would support as well, but I just don't think she has as much of a chance as Bernie does. And she also kind of came out against Medicare-For-All, which was a little weird. She said that supposedly it doesn't support like plastic surgery or something. Somebody was mentioning something about that, about why Tulsi Gabbard did not raise her hand when asked, "Do you support Medicare-For-All?" But I think she does support it to some extent. I don't know if she supported like the legislation that was in Congress because she's in the House of Representatives. I'm not sure if she supported that bill or not when it was proposed in the House. Especially when John Conyers, who's now a former member of Congress, he's retired now. He was pushing for essentially Medicare for all in the House caucus for many years. He kept proposing it, but I don't know if Tulsi Gabbard ever supported that legislation. So I'll have to check on that. But yeah, I mean, Bernie Sanders is the only candidate for me. At the moment, I have no other candidate that I would support other than Bernie Sanders. And if I were to vote in the general election, I would probably end up voting third party because I support the third party more than anybody outside of Bernie Sanders. So that's just, yeah, that's where my position is as far as candidates and parties. Even in the general election. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, Bernie is somebody that I hope gets in because he's our best and biggest hope for sure.